All right, so good to see you guys back again. As we said last time, this was going to be part two on the subject of working your network marketing business. Plexus particular is what we are talking about here. Um, with the whole unique, well, it's not really unique to most of us, but it is unique in for some who were used to the husband's only bringing in a paycheck and then you start bringing one in, and how that dynamic can work, and some of the ways we have learned that help us to work around it. Before we dive into that, I want to just review a little bit on the history and give you the perspective of why we are doing this. So, originally, Amber and I were discussing one time how we just see such a need for women to be okay with making big money. That was kind of where it all started. We need women to understand that it's okay to make big money, because it's in a lot of the like-minded women that we work with, who are your typical, Bible believing, really want to be a good Proverbs 31 woman, but stay at home. That's our hearts, to be at home. And we want our husbands to lead and provide. And a lot of us sometimes homeschool. Our hearts are just at home. And that's where we want to shine. Then we sometimes get into this, I don't know, call it rut or misconception. And maybe other people sometimes play into that with their ideas of it's not a good thing for a woman to earn a big income. That's more around the subject where our conversations went, and how we want to share what we have learned from scripture, from our husbands, and from our experience with other women, to just kind of settle some of that in their hearts, give them vision, give them understanding, because sometimes that's just all we lack, is understanding to really know um, where maybe an area is that we need to grow, or when we understand it better, we can have a freedom to move in it. Okay, so that was sort of how this all started. Long story short, we've been doing this since, I don't even remember, was it October or November? We started doing it every Wednesday. We decided to go to every other Wednesday to just give us a little more time to think and prep and plan. And so last week, we spoke on the subject of our husbands, working in harmony with them when we do start a big business like this, and how it can throw some of them for a loop when, number one, we're spending a lot of extra time on something like this, and number two, we sometimes surpass what they may have brought in income, and how that can affect them. And so last time we kind of talked about let's see, what did the perspective of a Proverbs 31 woman, how she's obviously a businesswoman and not just a hobbyist businesswoman. She's obviously doing something pretty big, bringing in some good money, and doing well, being very successful. And then what does it say about her husband? He is known in the gates when he sits among the elders in the land. And so that kind of gave us the perspective of, he is respected and honored by his wife and people around him, in spite of the fact that she's making big money. And so that was kind of the subject we covered last time. Okay, so we want to get into more of that today, but I want to just quickly just give my fast business experience with Plexus. I had only desired ever to be a stay-at-home mom, raise a big family, and just, you know, raise amazing kids, have a happy marriage, end of story. Like, I never had dreams really more than that. But came a time where we owned our own business. My husband and I poured our own blood, sweat, and tears, time and energy, late nights, all the things into this home business. Um, it was just pretty much on our shoulders. My husband built high-end custom cabinetry. So he had people he'd hire now and then, but for the most part, we did it together. And we knew the ups and downs and the ins and outs of growing your own business. And of course, things eventually got to a really rough point after the 2008 recession. That's starting to almost make us feel old when we talk about the 2008 recession. Like, to us, it was yesterday, but it's been a while ago. And Plexus came along at a time when we were both exhausted physically, mostly due to the hard work and stress of our struggling business. So the prayer we were praying was, Lord, bring us health answers. At our age, we didn't need to be in our 40s feeling like we were in our 60s. And we had a large family we wanted to provide for, and our 8 sons who we wanted to be able to encourage someday to do something big. And we felt like if we're broke forever, we'll never be able to help them with their dreams. And so we had a different vision for our future that we were praying for. And of course, Plexus answered those prayers. And I think for us, I can honestly say the thing that helped us through these tough times, as any business will be, trust me, I know what toughness is in a traditional business, and I know what toughness is in network marketing. There will be those times when you go, should we even be doing this? Or we have friction between us in our marriage over things in the business. And knowing that this was our answer to prayer, that God obviously sent this to us, I know is what was just sort of the foundation that carried us through a lot of these times. So very grateful for that. Okay, I'm going to give Sherry a minute to share her quick experience with growing her Plexus business, and then I'll let you go ahead, Sherry, and go into what you want to share today about marriage.
Thank you, Brenda. I always love hearing from you. You have been someone in my life because I started Plexus as a very young mom, and Brenda, I think your youngest was a toddler, and you had kids in your teenage years, I think, right? And so you were in a very different season of motherhood when you were doing Plexus, and I was in a different season, but you were someone that inspired me and helped me to see that this is possible, that I could do this and all those things. And I think that's really key. When you believe something's possible, you'll find ways to do it. That's how God designed our minds to work. And so there's been lots of things I've had to learn, partly just because I was a young mom. So I had to learn a lot of things just about running a home that I think I look back now and I see that Brenda already knew those things, like just how to communicate, to have weekly meetings with your spouse and weekly meetings with your family. Those are things that as a young mom, I hadn't implemented it all, but now that my kids are getting older, those things are really important. Communicating. Um, so I'm going to talk a little bit about communicating, but I was just wanting to share that this feeling of just being afraid of the future, afraid of, okay, I'm going to talk about this from a little bit more like a money thing. I knew how to be happy with not a lot. And so the idea of being happy with a lot actually made me afraid because I wasn't familiar with it. And there was just this idea that if I get a lot and then all of a sudden I don't have a lot, will I not know how to be happy anymore? It was like I felt afraid that I wouldn't know how to be happy or something. Well, that feeling translated into this whole area of marriage and everything too, just feeling, what if I put all this effort in and it doesn't produce what I'm trying to go for in my family? It wasn't a rational fear. There was actually nothing like, when you actually look at what's going on, it's not rational, but it is put on you a bit, like you were talking about, Brenda. And so what I had to do was I had to just get out of that fear, which was a choice, and just choose to discern, is there something I need to change, or is everything actually just fine? So I don't think you have to look very far in scripture to see that there's nothing wrong with making money. There's also nothing wrong with a female making money. But none of those things are where our discernment come from. Those are just, it sets you free, but you have to choose to get out of fear. You have to choose to not live there. So yeah, when it comes to my story with Plexus, Wes and I had vision for our family from the very beginning, and I'm assuming that's pretty normal. Like everyone has dreams when you get married, right? Like I think that's pretty normal. Wes was working, I was at home. That's just kind of how I thought life was. But my dad did start working from home when I was about 14. And so in my mind's eye, that was like the ultimate family life, was when mom and dad could run kind of like a mom pop shop sort of a thing. And so when Plexus came along, that just totally opened up my world to what a mom pop shop could be, because all of a sudden mom and pop shops they take a lot of time, and you certainly don't make this much money doing them. So I'm just like, wow, this is a whole different level. So I was just so excited for what this could bring to a mom and pop. um, some things to be aware of when it comes to communicating. That I've communicating is very challenging, and we might have a lot of feelings that come up with it. But there's some common things that I stand by that I'm thankful for, and I'm pretty sure they're not specific to Plexus or any business particularly. To me, they're just playing healthy marriage. But the reason why I talk about them right now is because what I found is running a business demanded that we level up in our communication in all those areas, because we were working together. Like there was right now, Wes and I work together doing the business, so that's really fun. That's like a dream come true for me. That was a lot of work that we put in to get to that point. I have a lot of stories to share of how we got to this point. But before that, I was more working the business, and Wes was supporting me, whether it was making a meal, whatever it might be. He was just like creating a space for me to do this. Um, so that's how we worked for a long time. These communication pieces were learning to actually express our needs. That was something that both of us had to learn. I specifically needed to learn to do that. I would often try to act like I didn't have needs, and then, of course, we have needs, right? So, learning to communicate and be honest with them, which demands vulnerability. Learning how to share our feelings in a way that was an ownership kind of a way. I used to not have feelings, sort of a thing. Like, I'm fine. It's how I was very strong in my mind. I could just like cover over. But learning to actually express those feelings, these things have really changed how our marriage feels. But again, it's like this is not specific to Plexus, but I learned this in my Plexus journey. Um, Assuming the best, that one's really important to me because it's so normal to have so many feelings going on when you're growing together in marriage. And we pick up different things from each other. So, assuming the best to me and communicating that best is, I don't know how we would get through some communication things if we weren't doing that. It would feel, like I said, communication is difficult sometimes. There's lots of feelings that you can get. Um, a big one is just communicating with ownership. So, owning your feelings, owning your needs, not being entitled to any of those things, but communicating them vulnerably. So, a mixture of ownership and vulnerability. These things are uncomfortable, but they are, for growth, to me, they're absolutely necessary and things that I would want to encourage anyone to step into, um, so that they can have that close knit relationship as they're building. One thing that I see often is a feeling of, this is a little bit off the topic of communication, but it's just a common thing that I've noticed is, and this is not specific to Plexus business, but again, it shows up in the Plexus business because I think this kind of business just really takes the covers off of what's really going on, and you either have to face it or you try to hide it again and say that the Plexus business is the problem because it's uncovering things in your marriage. But feeling like you need to minimize yourself to not, so that the other person has value. That's a common thing that will happen in spouses, in the roles, is just sort of being in competition, not having space for both of you to bring your all, your very best, and um, kind of feeling like only one of you can have a spotlight, sort of thing. Only one of you can show up and share your gifts that God's given you. Whenever I see anything like that, I know that there's something way deep going on and that we need to do some scuba diving. um, so, oh, one more thing I want to share. I just have a bunch of random notes here. Dates for fun. So before Plexus, anytime we had a moment together, we considered it a date because it was kind of rare that we had any time together. But now we have lots of time together. So dates specifically mean having fun times together because we're working together lots. We're with each other lots. It was one of my dreams was to be together lots. So now dates mean specifically having fun together. And so we're actually working on that more. Anyway, that's what I have. It sort of doesn't necessarily feel super connected. It doesn't feel like super plexusy, but it's just foundational to me for healthy marriage, no matter what you're doing, really.
Yes, I agree so much. And it, like you said, when we work a business like this, it's going to uncover things. We've all know what we're talking about when we say we've experienced personal growth in working our Plexus business. And the same thing can happen in any relationship, that it does uncover and bring some stuff up. So, so good, Sherry. That was so um spot on. I like how you said we just have we need to level up. Like we need to look at this as an opportunity to level up, to improve and to grow. I think I can say, looking back now, I wasn't even ever never heard much talk about personal growth before I came into Plexus. I mean, somewhat, but not, of course, as much as we do in here. And looking back, I see now where because we were committed to this business, like come hell or high water, we were going to do this. Like that was just, it was just not even a doubt. And then we also had a commitment to each other, and we knew we would face, just like I knew I would face opposition in the business. We knew we would, I don't know, never really talked about it, but it's just like you just know if you move forward in something new and different and big, there's going to be things that will come up. And but we just had a commitment to work things out that I know without that, it's so easy just to give up or brush over or not address them. So that communication aspect is so important, Sherry. Thank you so much for sharing that. You know, the thing when we share, I always think of this every time I share about anything with marriage is let's just be so careful to not compare. For example, Sherry mentioned West cooking meals. That is something I can identify with. I've never had that. In my husband that he will take over cooking. Now, there is a rare occasion where I'm like down, there's zero anybody to go in the kitchen, he'll make eggs or whatever. But that's just not his forte. And I've actually never really needed him because I've usually had kids that could do it. So he got by without needing to step in. Just an example of there are all these different dynamics, intermarriages that are different, and your communication with your husband is just there's the basic thing that Sherry was talking about here is just to do it. Just make sure you are communicating your feelings. And as things come up without, I mean, I had to resign many, many years ago to the fact that my husband's not going to be domestic. He's not going to be the one that's going to go in the kitchen and wash dishes and pick up anything after me. And that's okay. Like I said, God worked out so many ways to bless me otherwise, and he does so many other wonderful things in our marriage. So when I hear that, the thought comes to me, let's remember we don't compare. And so as I share, I want you to keep that in mind too. Um, so some things that we discussed, Amber and Sherry and I, after we got off of the other one, we had opened it up for Q&A at the end. And so there were a couple subjects we had talked about we didn't really cover before, that we didn't have time to, that we wanted to bring up today. And one of those was just meeting your husband's needs. I think in this business, we can get caught up in what we're doing. And I will even say, before I had a Plexus business, there were things I would get caught up in and spend a lot of time in or get kind of carried away in. And he'd have to remind me, hey, I'm over here. So I have a tendency to be kind of all in. I could just really get sidetracked and focus on something big time. So the business wasn't necessarily an exception, but it was a time when I had to realize that um, he felt so much better, had so much of a better attitude toward my business and me spending time on it if I met his needs first. So even on our team, we had a joke among each other about putting him to bed. And you guys know what I mean, putting him to bed good, and then getting up and doing some of your work. And it's like he doesn't really care that much if I get up and work an hour or two after he's sound asleep. And so I found that that worked for me. Our days were super full and busy with kiddos. And so there were a lot of days where I didn't get my work time in during the day like I wanted. And after everybody was in bed was sometimes my only option. And I was kind of a night owl, so that worked for me. But I would, I always went to bed with him. Like that's just been a thing that for us, we've decided we always want to do from day one was to go to bed together. That was important to us to spend that time together, getting ready for bed and going to bed together. That's when we had a time to talk and catch up on the day. So I didn't want to say, oh, I have to work my plexus business. You go to bed without me. I knew that was not going to be good for us. A lot of coffee the next day. I felt I just didn't. I mean, I used active if I needed to, I guess, but I'm not a super early riser. We'll just put that out there. I'm not one of these women that get up at 5 and light my candle and have all this wonderful, glorious time before my kids get up. I just had a discussion with my daughter-in-law about this the other day. She's like, sometimes I don't know, social media or what, moms can feel guilty for not being these early risers and doing all this amazing stuff while it's dark. Yes, I know Proverbs 31 woman did that, but it has not been a great thing for me. I I'm one that I tend to need to just jump into my day. My day goes better than if I'm going to be sitting around doing all this cozy stuff before I start my day. Anyway, everybody's different that way. My point being, and it wasn't every night, by the way. I didn't like do that every night. Have sex, put him to bed, get up and work 2 hours. No, that wasn't every night. That was just as I knew he needed it. And as those times came up where I knew I needed to get some extra work done after the kids were in bed. Not every night. So that's something that is super important to keep in mind, that he can overlook so much when his needs are met. And I'm specifically speaking to physical needs because that's just huge for a husband. But, like even before I started the business, my husband told me, you can spend as much time as you need on this as long as I have clean underwear in the drawer. So there were just some things that he just he wants to make sure there's going to be a meal on the table on time. And if you can't, you communicate about it, you work out a different plan, but just honor him. If he feels honored all through the business, it's just not, there's just so much he can overlook and be okay with if he feels honored. Um, and then the other question that came up, and I'll open this up for Q&A later too, was what do I do? Because my husband doesn't like me getting on Zooms in the evening, the night Zooms. And I thought there was one other specific shared about time like that. And again, I just have to say, you have to honor him with those things. Um, just watch the recording later, or try to, if you're the one that's scheduling the Zoom, don't schedule it at a time that he is not happy with. It is your business. You can schedule when I mean, yes, we want to show up to our team Zooms, but I think your business will be honored when you honor your husband and just choose to watch the recording later rather than be on live. And I know that a lot of people do Zooms in the evenings. I've really stopped doing that quite a few years ago for that reason. I want my team to spend time with their families and husbands in the evening if that's important to their families. Now, everyone's schedule's different. Maybe that's not a need for every family, but it's huge for us. In fact, I remember the day my family started complaining, oh no, not another Zoom, Mom. That was my wake-up call to not cut out of our family time to do that. So again, that's probably going to be different for every family. Sherry, did you have any thoughts at this point, or anything questions from last time that you remember?
Well, I guess this is one thing I wanted to share. It was just the reality that this is our business, and it's very normal, especially if you've been working as an employee, to think you're under things and to feel like, oh, I have to submit to whatever program is out there. But like Brenda said, we've made the business work for us, and that's a trial and error thing. You know that plan, do, review cycle. Like I do that in the marriage, in the family, in the business. That's just like there's no one thing fits all. It isn't that way. It's a growth journey personally, and in your marriage, it's a growth thing. So just taking ownership of taking ownership of your commitments, your scheduling, and do that with your husband if you can. But I also know that Wes's and my vision was very similar, and I know that there's couples that their husband isn't where Wes was at, and so you're gonna have your own growth journey, and you're gonna be. But the thing that I'm thankful for is I'm thankful for the growth. We're better because of the growth. I'm thankful that Wes leaned into it and I leaned into it, but I would want to encourage you to lean into that.
I love that. Someone asked if you could reshare what you said in the beginning about, what was it again? Just
I
about
think
the,
I was, tell me if this is what you're thinking about, but I was just thinking that I was just talking about how I had to make a choice to not get caught up in fear around all of this stuff, but to actually listen to my discernment, which is different than fear. And sometimes if you're caught in fear, it can be hard to discern. But I had to really trust God. I knew He'd brought this into our life. I knew that. And so I had to trust that growth journey and the whole journey to Him, both in our family, our marriage, personally, all those things. So um and yeah, that was a choice to not live in fear.
I love that. That was such a good thought. Did the fear versus it's a choice. And then she asked what you had said about belief. You probably had something in there about belief too, but I think that was very well said. Okay,